Hi, and welcome back to Map the Maze. So today I wanted to share with you some information about how companion animals, also known as pets, are being dealt with in Australia in the context of divorce and separation from the 10th of June, and a little bit about how we can deal with companion animals in Hong Kong. So as of the 10th of June, Australia's Family Law Amendment Act comes into force, which will mean that companion animals and their arrangements post-divorce will also be examined by the court, not as if they are objects or property or chattels, which they have been to date, but as actual living beings who have rights to be cared for and looked after appropriately. So the court will look at things like who owns the animal, who has provided financially for the animal, who has cared for the animal, whether there have been any threats of domestic violence or actual domestic violence against the animal in terms of making those arrangements. In Hong Kong, we are quite far away from legislation like that, and animals here, companion animals, are seen as chattels, as possessions. So generally when I'm working with people in mediation, I think most people just agree to agree something. They don't want to spend time in mediation putting in place arrangements around any companion animals, and often those animals, dogs, cats, guinea pigs, will travel with children, if there are any children, if that's possible. So that is one option. I would say, having done a pet custody course by Kara Snafter, which is based on her book, Keeps the Dog, that I think my thinking around how to deal with companion animals has really changed, and that bearing in mind their breed, their age, their health, their sociability, their bondedness to other companion animals, all of those factors are really important. So whilst you might say that a bouncy, 3-year-old dog is happy to move with the children back and forth between homes, if you have a 13-year-old dog who is less mobile and less adaptable, they're probably not going to be as happy moving around all the time, because it will take them time to settle. Or maybe that dog is incredibly resilient and actually the change is something that they love. So looking at the actual individual characteristics of each animal is just as important as understanding the needs and developmental stages of children. From my perspective, I appreciate this is not a shared perspective for everyone. So when I have had people in mediation in Hong Kong who don't just want to treat the dog or the arrangements for the dog as something that they'll figure out later down the track or as a possession, there are things that you can do in mediation to put in place arrangements that reflect your understanding of your dog and the realities of the situation, the practicalities of life, and how you would like to try and manage this going forward. So, for example, I have worked with people who wanted to have arrangements around where would the dog live. Would the dog spend time living with each person, or would they live primarily with one person? How much time would people have? So, for example, if the dog is living, I'm just using dog as an example. So this is my dog, Clementine. I can't imagine having shared time with somebody else with her, although she is, to be honest, quite cat-like, so maybe she wouldn't even notice. But if the dog is living primarily with one person, can the other person spend time with them? Can they take them for a walk in the evenings? Can they take them for a hike on the weekend? Then there's things that I think are really practical, which are helpful actually for pet owners. If one of you, the person the dog primarily lives with, is going on a business trip or is going on holiday, can they go and stay with the other person? Can the other person have more time to spend with them walking, taking them out? Because in fact, that might be comforting, reassuring for the dog. What about costs? How will costs be shared? And I did have one very small, I think it was a teacup poodle. Sadly, I did not get to meet it. I didn't get to meet anybody outside the mediation who had some very expensive tastes and was costing thousands of dollars per month on a very specific treat, which even I, as an incredibly indulgent dog owner, thought was really off the charts expensive. I was told by both parties that this was really important, that the dog absolutely loved this treat and it was very important for their health. And so part of how was that sustainable going forward was included in their negotiations in terms of financial arrangements. So sometimes the financial cost of managing for caring for a pet can be shared. And the last one is the tough one, medical decision making. So most pet owners, I think, probably ignore this, but will at some stage realize that they will be responsible for end-of-life decisions for an animal. That unless there is some crisis, the chances are that there will be a conversation that you will be having with your vet at some stage about what to do as your pet has aged and maybe sickened. And those decisions are really difficult because the one living creature who is most impacted by that decision has the absolute least voice in the matter. And the responsibility of that is a lot. So one of the things that people sometimes do is talk about how will they have those end-of-life discussions. Will they do that jointly? Will it be a consult? Will it be an inform? Because these things are really difficult to do. I think it's been interesting for me watching people have some of these conversations because it's like many things in mediation. Until you have to make a plan, nobody thinks about any of these things. But once you start thinking, okay, shall we put in place some arrangements, then I think it becomes really important to put in place all of the arrangements, particularly things like end-of-life decision-making. I would say I remember one mediation which was really strangely unemotional and then very emotional, which was a couple who were divorcing. There were no children. They had been married for a very, very long time. But they did have some cats. And at the very end, one of them, who was going to be staying and the cats were going to remain with that party, said to the other party across the table, and this had been after a very unemotional and unexpressive mediation. People really didn't make eye contact and there was very little heat in the conversation, said, I know that you love the cats, and if you would like to come and visit the cats, then all you need to do is just let me know when you're coming and I'll let the helper know to let you in. And they both started crying, and it was a very moving and emotional time because it was as if the cats were the repository for all of their love and intensity and care, and that this was a generous statement by the other person to say, you can still come and see the cats. So it was a really tender moment, an intimate moment to see people having an emotional reaction who really hadn't reacted emotionally to anything. So something to think about. So if you are getting divorced or separating and you do have companion animals and you would like to put arrangements in place, then one place you can do that is mediation. So you might want to have a think about what would those arrangements look like? What do I think would make sense given what I know about the other person and also the companion animal that we're talking about? So until we get legislation like Australia has, we will keep having to do it in mediation. Okay, thanks for joining and take care, and I'll see you next week.